Tango Audio.
Today, my newest feature film, Sex, Love, Venice, comes out in select theaters and video on demand. You can see the film on Prime Video, Fandango at Home, Apple TV, and Google Play. I'm Steve Balderson, and you're listening to the Filmmaking Confidential podcast. In every episode, we meet with filmmakers, writers, actors, artists, and other notables. Today's guests are the leading actors from the new film, Sex, Love, Venice. I'm joined by Daniel Bateman, Alexander Ananasso, co-producer Jo Stanhope, and master cinematographer Hanuman Brown-Eagle. This is a recording of their very first introduction.
Here we are. So Alexander, meet Daniel. Daniel, Alexander. This is Jo. She's in the UK.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I am.
Nice to meet
Hi,
you.
guys. It's so nice to meet you. Really good to meet you both.
You too.
Wish I put some makeup on.
It's nice to put
We're so looking.
Okay, I have been so excited to ask this question ever since you told me, Alexander. Can you tell me what is holistic acting?
I mean, I can, but I'm not sure how long a reply do you expect.
Well, it can be short or long. It doesn't matter. I'm just really curious what's your approach?
Right. Okay. So basically, my approach to it's an approach to acting where it's both acting and personal development at the same time. So we're using acting techniques for the development and the growth of the person, but also as an acting training. So my main training in between the rest was in method acting, specifically the Strasberg and Adler method. And when I expanded that with different techniques that had to do with drama therapy, theater of the oppressed. So basically what's called applied theater, which means, again, using drama theater techniques to the healing or self-development, basically. So that's what I did. I started giving classes and coaching mainly actors, and then artists as well, and people who want to get into acting or art. And I just realized that I wanted to expand that I wasn't just teaching the Strasberg method per se, but I was much more interested in the development of the person, the healing part of the person, because I realized that was a big part for me too. Like as an actor, I trained a lot in that method because I felt that it was really helping me as a person, helping me grow. And so I wanted to do the same thing for the people, basically, for the people who came to me. And so that's what I did. I trained more into those kind of areas that would expand the self-development aspect, because I didn't really train officially in that. Obviously, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist. So I didn't have all those techniques. So that's why I took this drama therapy foundation course at the University of Roehampton, and then I did a few other bits here and there, where I apprehended those techniques that would help me, like, for example, doing a check-in and check-out, which I realized that it helped hugely, just to come out safely of a session, for example, because it can be very delicate, it can be very intense. So the way that it's done, it's very important that you give people the time to decompress, and also differentiate between what's play and what's real life. It shouldn't affect you too much. It does affect you because it's, you're working with real life memories and emotions that are truthful, that are real, but then you don't want it to become something that, oh my God, I did this, acting training all day, and now I'm like drained and I can't do anything, and I feel like emotional, traumatized, all those kind of things that shouldn't happen, basically.
Well, and that's one of the questions I have also now, understanding a little bit more, is from what I understand with method actors, and going back into memory, and finding out, like, let's say there's a really emotional scene, or you have, there's something that is a traumatic part to the character, and you go back and you bring up a moment from your past that has been traumatic. Sometimes I'm curious if that performer, by doing that, often heals, or somehow is either healed by bringing it back up and working with it, or maybe it is re-traumatizing, if they have some sort of PTSD with it. Have you found both to be the case?
Yes, it's there's a potential for both to happen. So yeah, that's the short answer. So yeah, it depends on how you do it, basically.
That's really, really amazing.
That's really interesting, actually, Alex. Alexander, I was working with a guy recently who had most of his scenes were emotional. He had to really dig deep. And I asked the direct question. I said, where do you go? And he says, I can't even tell you. He goes, I can't even tell you. And he would have to. So for him, it was like pure PTSD. There was no therapy. There was no healing. There was no nothing. And I thought, oh my golly, what does that do to you long term? How do you maintain that? I mean, he was broken. It was just awful to be around, because you're breathing the same air and you're loving these people. You get so close, don't you? And you become friends, and it's like, oh my gosh, my heart's breaking. So that's a really, everything that you've just said is like really pretty heavy stuff, isn't it? When it takes you that path.
That's the thing. I mean, I don't know, like, people have a different approach, obviously, to acting, to method acting, to whatever you want. But, like, my own take is that, personally, I think that my work and my art, whatever you want to call it, shouldn't affect my personal life too much, to the point that I can't function, or that it damages me. I think it should be the other way around. Like, they should feed each other, and then obviously you can go through phases. We all go through phases in life where, we're a bit down, or we had a problem, we had a trauma, we had a really difficult experience, and that does bring you down. And it's important that you do acknowledge that, and you embrace the low as well as the up. And that's true for personal life as well as acting. It's the same thing. So sometimes you'll go and do a scene, and when you perform your scene, it's not coming the way that you thought it was going to come out, right? And maybe you feel like, oh, maybe because today was a bit, I was a bit low, or I don't know, there were certain circumstances. Say, for example, something like so serious as what you just said, Jo. So, like, doing a scene that's to do with, like, a serious trauma or a serious, PTSD situation. The way that you go about it, for me, would have to be something that I know, as an actor, that then I'm able to go as close as possible to the truth, in order to perform it truthfully and not lie, because to me, acting is not lying, is actually being truthful, and come out of it as undamaged as possible, possibly even healed, obviously. Yeah.
God, that's so fascinating. I love it. Daniel, what's your background training?
So I started in theater when I was about 5 years old, in musicals. I did the national tour of Les Mis. I did Barney and Sesame Street as a little kid. So I grew up singing and dancing and acting. And I think my parents always just wanted to find a source to put my energy, just because I've always been a vibrant person. And so I stuck with that. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. So, theater wasn't something that everybody was talking about all the time. But I found my way into it, and I stuck with it. So when I was 17 years old, I went to the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York, and then LA. And then I did a 2-year program with the Juilliard School in New York as well. And I did Wicked on Broadway, and I just sort of stuck with theater for a long, long, long time. But film has always been an interest, and it's always been something that I have dabbled in, but never really been able to explore as deeply as my theater background allowed. And so that's why this is such a great opportunity for me, is to bring that just sort of that depth and that vulnerability that you do get on the stage into this more intimate, beautiful setting. So I'm really, really looking forward to it.
Was there a quote unquote method that you learned, or did you learn all sorts of them?
All sorts of methods. There wasn't really one in particular that I resonated with, to be honest. For me, it is, I think there's little pieces of all of the different methods that you can apply to different scenarios. I do find that different methods for me work better if I'm doing comedy than if I'm doing drama. But for me, I think the biggest thing is acting from a place of vulnerability. I think for me, it's just sort of surrendering to what that would feel like for me, what that would feel like for that character. Not so much worried about the polished version of it, and sort of committing, because I think we live in this time right now where Instagram and social media, everything is so polished and curated and perfect. And I think it's so important to remember that, if we are having an intimate moment, it's not always perfect, that it is messy, that it's okay to not, look perfect and to have a hair out of place in a moment. Like, these are real life, human, everyday things. And I think that really translates the best in terms of a method, is just surrendering to the idea that no matter how I look in this scene, that this is truthful and this is real.
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
Hanuman Brown-Eagle, our cinematographer, is surprisingly awake at this hour. I don't think he's an early bird. Maybe he is, but I picture him always waking up at like 10 or 11, or if we're going to go, today we're having lunch, and he's always 10 minutes late. So I always imagine him waking up and going, oh shit, and then jumping in the car, and then that's why he's always late. But he just texted me, and I'm going to ask him if he wants to join us.
Daniel, that was really interesting, because I do a lot of casting, and I find it, and I produce as well, and I find it really frustrating when actors are not thinking of, they're actually thinking about what their hair looks like or what their outfit is. And everyone's always mic'd up, and the amount of times I've heard, I'd never wear this outfit. I mean, come on, I'd never do my hair like that. And I always like to just chirp up and go, yeah, but you're not so, you're playing a part, so therefore she would wear this outfit. And oh, sorry, Jo, no offense, like this. And I just find it mind-boggling that people are just, because you're right, it doesn't matter what your hair looks like, or, if they've uglified you for this scene because that's what this scene entails, or your clothes are not to your taste, but that's what this guy would wear. Because you're acting, you're playing somebody else, you're not playing yourself. And it's still, to this day, 30 years deep in doing what I do, find it mind-boggling that actors still say that to me, going, I know you wouldn't wear your hair like that or whatever. It's staggering. It really is. Exactly. Oh dear.
It's one of my,
yes.
That's why I think, there are performers who are sometimes surprises, like when Mariah Carey was in that movie Precious, and she was just raw, she was lit badly, and she was really truthful. And I was like, good for her, to like drop the diva and let herself look like a human being, and then I see other things where it's, it's like Madonna did that in a movie called Snake Eyes that she did with, I can't remember the director, but it co-starred James Russo and Harvey Keitel. And she just let herself look real, but nobody ever saw it. It was like this smaller movie, and I'm like, oh, that's too bad, because she was really incredible.
I've never seen that. I'm making note.
Oh, it's great.
It's just so important that, some of the, when I've been in person with someone and they've been crying in front of me, what I remember most is like the snot, that like comes out, and like all these other, like, I know it sounds crazy, but it's these other little details that film doesn't always pick up, because things can be so curated, and I think it's just so important to remember that, like, that is real life, and that there is beauty in that, and there's sexiness in that, and I think with intimacy as well, I think such an important part of having sex in some way on camera is depicting that there are different languages in having sex, right? There's soft sex, there's a rougher sex, there's a more animalistic sex, passionate. Everything is a language of its own, and there's not one that's right or wrong. But I think that there almost seems to be one type of sex often that we see with like a character. It's kind of like one dimensional. It's like it's either soft or it's either aggressive. And I think what I liked about this script was the idea in there that there are these really tender, sensitive, beautiful moments, but there's also these really heated, passionate, intense moments too. And I think that's humanity. That's a relationship. That's love, is not losing that playfulness, but also really connecting on a deeper level.
Well, and I totally
Absolutely
agree.
Beautifully put. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting how you and I had this discussion, Daniel. I don't remember if Jo and I did, and Alexander, we're gonna talk about this also on Wednesday or Thursday, whenever we're going through the script. I know one of the other days is costume day, but when I came back from my experience in Venice, I really became aware of people only having exchanges of intimacy at night in the dark with the lights off, with the windows pulled, everything hidden, so they couldn't even see their spouse or their partner. It's like, let's go hide in the dark. And I thought, God, there must be so much internal shame or so much what I just started questioning that, because I learned that I really enjoyed that activity in the middle of the afternoon in broad daylight. And I would have partners every now and again who would instinctively turn the light off or close and pull the blinds. And I thought, well, no one can see us. There's no windows across the way. Why are you turning the light off? I mean, I was so fascinated by this. And sometimes it would just kill the mood, because I was more than interested in psychologically understand why they were hiding their own being, in some way, and whether or not even that they knew it, if they were conscious about it, or if it was just an unconscious, oh, we're going to make out now, let's turn the light off. Like I was curious if it was conscious or not. Have you, any of you, ever thought of that scenario about hiding, or the lights off or the lights on, or times of day, or etc.? And maybe it's a strictly, like, I also think America was settled by Puritans, so a lot of the culture and the history of the United States comes from a place, from people who were incredibly conservative and reserved, and fled the crazy hedonists of Europe, back in the day. So I'm curious if, from a standpoint culturally, the differences between how you were raised, Jo, or how you were raised, Alexander, might be different with what you've seen, your exposure to art, your exposure to all kinds of life in a different way as it relates to
well, I totally get where you're coming from with that, Steve. For me, I would be the complete extreme, because I had a very unconventional childhood, so it was wild. So I have no inhibitions. So any time of the day, any place, I actually like it outside. I'm a very much broad daylight, not in a public, forum, but a private beach or something in the middle of the day, just the sexiest thing ever, just gorgeous. So for me, no, but I do understand why lots of people, because now I'm a mother of two, married 25 years, and so it'd be sort of like, oh, actually, and where you are is in your bedroom, and so there's nothing closeted about it. It's just, that's the journey our life has taken. However, if we're not in that situation, it reverts right back. So for me, it's not cultural, it was purely upbringing. I'm a massive extrovert, have no problems sexually. I'm completely comfortable with my sexuality. My husband was a lot more reserved and much more, we were kind of middle class, but I was a band baby, so my husband comes from a very, very posh family, so very reserved. So there was a difference there, but there's been lots of teaching and we're perfectly in tune now. So that's me. But you'd think the Brits would be the stuffy ones, but I don't think I'm your average Brit personally. So in that area.
Doesn't sound like it.
Yeah. Yeah, band baby, you know, it's just you can't help it. I'm a rock star's kid. We're naughty.
Someday I'll have to hear some of those stories, because like, were you ever taken on tours
I've
and
got
stuff?
a million. Yes, absolutely. So on my third birthday, I didn't go on tour with Black Sabbath because I was 3, but my father didn't make it home for my third birthday because he was in prison with Ozzy Osbourne. So they spent the night in jail together. I know there's a million of those, Steve. We'll workshop it all in Italy over a nice full-bodied Italian.
Amazing.
A glass of red wine. Not suggesting anything else here, boys.
Alexander,
Yeah.
where were you?
So, yeah.
Where were you raised, Alexander?
In Italy, in Rome.
What was that like?
I mean, it's a bit like being in, because I mean, Rome is the capital. So on one hand, it's very, you know, progressive, but on the other hand, we're talking about Italy, which I usually refer to as the Afghanistan of Europe, and also it's the Vatican City is there, which obviously does what it does. So yeah, it's like it's a big village sometimes. So yeah, it wasn't necessarily great on some, for some, you know, some in some regards. And yeah, no. So regarding the sexuality thing, the Puritan aspect, and all that, yeah, I mean, obviously that's massive in Rome. So yeah, it's weird because, as I said, it's a weird city in that regard. So you kind of get both things, both visions. I mean, I get it. What you talked about in the, you know, in your discussion with Daniel, because I listened to it yesterday. It was, yeah, really interesting. I think it's completely true, you know, that people have this tendency to like switch lights off.
It's interesting. Oh, good. Hanuman is here to join us. I'll introduce you. Who knows whether we'll see him or not? Mr. Hanuman Brown-Eagle has joined the group.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Hanuman.
Hi.
Hi.
Good morning or evening.
Good morning, girl. Thank you. Good morning to you, Hanuman. Nice to hear you. This is Jo.
Hi, Jo.
Jo is in the UK. Alexander is in Barcelona, right? And Daniel is in Studio City. And
Excellent.
Hanuman is in Sherman Oaks.
Yes.
Perfect. We're neighbors.
Check us out.
Yeah.
Love this, man.
I wanted you to just sit in and feel this, because it's really good energy, Hanuman. And I am so happy that when you texted me, I was like, oh my God, you're awake. I should send you this note.
Well, thank you for the invite.
So we were just talking about cultural differences with, you know, for instance, I brought up to them, you know, when I came back from Venice, I was really aware of the people who would, you know, have any kind of sexual experience at night in the dark with the windows shut and the lights off so they couldn't see each other or themselves, right? And I always found that really curious where that came from, you know. And then we started talking about cultural growings up. And I was in the middle of asking Alexander about growing up in Rome. And my next question was, how is it still? Is there homophobia
in Rome?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. I mean, it's a massive issue in Italy, generally speaking, because obviously I say obviously, but I mean, it's the government keeps, you know, trying to shut down any sort of law that is kind of trying to defend LGBT people's rights. And so they always try, you know, like recently they did something, I believe, that was to do with annulling a law that had to do with adopting kids for same-sex couples. And so it had to do with, so it was about recognizing both of the parents as parents, basically. So that's what the law said. And so the government said, no, that's not true anymore. So now one of them has to be the parent, the biological one. The other one cannot be considered the parent. And so, I mean, that's just the most recent thing. But it's a massive issue.
Where is the most friendly city? Is it Milan?
It could be Milan, I guess. Yeah, I think it could be Milan.
I mean, I am not a person who has lots of public displays of affection with whomever I'm with, typically. But I never felt any pushback when I was in Venice or even Florence. And there were a couple little towns like Orvieto, some of those hilltop towns that I could tell were more reserved, but I never felt scared or in danger by any means. Although I don't know, is it something where there's like do we need to worry about anybody finding out that this film is LGBTQ plus in a positive light while we're there? Like, will there be picketers and or is everybody more reserved?
That's $1 million question.
I suppose we'll find out. But and Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, but Venice is part of an area of Italy that is massively conservative.
Right.
So there's that to be said.
There's that to be said. We've had lots of good feedback. Sorry, Alexandra, there's a massive feedback and there's a massive delay when you speak. So I apologise that I just spoke over you then. But I have been labouring the point whilst, approaching people, and I've not had, we've not had only with the film commission, the people that we've spoken to on the ground. It's been very warm. It's been very warm today. So I'm hopeful. I'm going to put that into the universe. I'm really hopeful that we will have smooth runnings. Exactly. Keep everything crossed for me, Steve. So fingers crossed. But sorry, you were about to say before I spoke over you. I apologise.
No. It was just, obviously there's not possible to know. Like, I had situations happening in the center of London, which is the last place you would expect, people to harass you or attack you because you're gay. So, I mean, it's impossible to know. But it's, we don't have anything public that is terribly evident. I mean, I guess we have the two scenes with the touching under the table, right? But I guess that's going to be all right.
Well, and that's at this cafe where she said, "Oh, come and film that in the afternoon because we close at noon, so there won't be anybody there." And that's when I said to Daniel the other day, Jo, that we might have to, you and I, sit at one of the tables to be extras because there won't be anybody there.
No problem.
No
problem at all. That's fine.
Yeah, but like I've seen hand holding in public and nobody cares, it seems,
But I mean, also, it's going to be a film. Like, people can see the camera. I mean, I don't think people would do anything because they're against it or anything like that. I mean, that would be really weird.
Totally. Daniel,
tell us,
share with us a little bit about growing up gay in a place in the middle of Kansas, Missouri. Like, how was that for you?
Well, for me, getting into acting and performing was my outlet, because it was the one source that I had where I knew there were other people that were different in some way. I went to a private Christian school, grew up a little more conservative that way. And so for me, as I became a teenager and I was in theater, that was my only exposure to seeing a male couple, really, other than just me, late at night, going onto the internet on my parents' computer. And, I thought that they didn't see the search history, and they did. But I think it's really interesting because I remember coming out. I had a very different situation where my parents were very supportive. I came out because when I was 16, my mom came into the room and she shut the door. And she said, I want to talk to you about something. And she said, Jason, this guy that was like a friend of mine that I would just hang out with, she said, you're hanging out with him a lot, you know, and there seems to be, you seem to really, really get along. And she just kind of kept easing into it and just kind of allowing the space for me to talk. And then she just at one point said, are you gay? And I said, yeah. I just didn't hesitate at all. And I had tears in my eyes and she had tears in her eyes. And all she did, she was silent, but she hugged me. And I think for me in that moment, that's really all I needed. I don't think there really were words that were needed. Just having her hold me and let me feel that it was all okay was everything. Because in the back of my mind, I was like, I'm going back to school tomorrow where people don't know about this, or people are making fun of me for this, because I do think people, you know, they knew. I was not talking about girls. I was not overly masculine, you know, as a kid or anything like that. So they figured it out. But it was just so beautiful that I had that support from my mom, and then which led to my dad being supportive too. And they pulled me out of that school the next week just because I was so miserable and I just didn't want to be there anymore. But in general, I would say Kansas as a whole, like growing up and being gay there, it was just hard to find what being with a man could look like past just a one night thing. I think it was just sort of viewed as this sexual outlet, something dirty, and just, yeah, I mean, I think that was the hardest part. And I remember going to San Francisco for the first time when I was 21 and being at the Pride Parade and just seeing so many people that were LGBT. And I think for me, that was kind of that turning point where I'm like, no matter whatever I felt in Kansas City growing up, there are so many of us, and there are so many people that are just, you know, not able to express that part of themselves until they're in a certain arena like Pride. So I think it's been a journey for me to get to LA and to be in New York and to come from where I'm from. I'm blessed, you know. I feel really lucky to be able to finally be comfortable with my complete sexuality.
Oh, thank you for being so honest. That was so lovely to listen to, Daniel, and you just poured it out honestly, and thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to second what you said, Jo. Thank you. I feel, you know, like this is weighted one direction. You know, pull me aside on the plane or something, and I'll tell you everything about myself. But yes, thank you so much for sharing openly, and I feel honored to just be in this Zoom room with you guys.
Well, and Daniel, I just wanted to add also that Hanuman is from Kansas City.
Oh
yes.
My God.
Yes. I grew up in Lawrence and then moved to Kansas City in my 20s and lived there for 10 years or so.
Wow. Well, it's changed so much over the last 10 years. So
that's true. That is true.
Every time I go back, it's so different now, in a good way.
Did you guys go through the storyboards or not yet? That's fine. You know, I want to go have a session where we're going through all of them, you know, scene by scene and just talking about them. But were there any that were undecipherable that you're like, what is this? Like you can't quite tell what's going on? Or was there like any of those that came to you?
I have nothing major. Like there was one or two where I wasn't quite sure, but it doesn't, like, I don't think it's nothing that we actually need to necessarily, you know, go through it right now. Like it doesn't,
okay,
like it's, you know, something, oh my God, what's going on here? Like it's fine.
Okay. I mean, sometimes like when I was trying, I can draw when I have patience, you know,
I mean, some of them were really good.
I know. I agree.
Thank you. When I did my movie Firecracker, I got out the design markers and I sketched them like on big, every shot was the size of one piece of paper. And I really made them like artworks, and then I scanned them and put them in. And I haven't done it to that detail since then because I just, primarily, it's just a map to fall back on is how I look at them. Because I feel like when Hanuman and I have finally gotten to the set, he sometimes gets frustrated with me because he'll, and maybe I'm speaking for you, but you could, tell me what your version of this is. He'll plan his shot lists in his mind and where he'll be doing what. And then I get there and say, oh my God, look at the lighting in here. It's amazing. Let's do everything from the other side of the room instead, and then he's like, oh, okay. Well, so it's a little bit like, sometimes I'll go into a scene and I won't even look at the storyboards. I'll just feel the organic space, like what does it look like in here? When we go into that cafe, when we're sitting by the window, what's the light doing actually? And where will we, I might be inspired by a shot just because of the architecture of the space, and where the table is and what color is the chair that might inform me in a totally different way than what's drawn. Does that make sense to everybody?
100% for me, yes. I mean, I've been through that so many times where it's like set in my mind exactly how it needs to be done, but then once we arrive, we see something that we just didn't know existed until that moment, and we have to take advantage of it. So yeah, I'm 100% on board for that way of thinking. It's like, as you said, something to fall back on, but we have to always keep our eyes open and look for the magic that's there and default to that.
Alexander, are you also a director? Like, have you, I know you're a stage director sometimes, but have you worked in film as a director?
I mean, not really. I mean, only once, like ages and ages ago. So I don't really count it because it doesn't count. But yeah, no. So as in that one was a short movie that I helped write, and then I also acted in it, and it was, yeah, I don't know, like. I see myself mainly as a stage director at the moment.
Tell me a little bit about the differences between directing for stage versus movies.
Well, I don't know enough of directing films, which is kind of the point. It's kind of the reason why I don't see myself as a film director. I know a lot about theater, and I know a lot about acting, which I think for me, theater is all about acting anyway. Like the first thing should be acting. You can do theater with an actor and a chair or no chair. So everything else kind of comes afterwards, after that. Whereas in film is obviously much more complicated because you have to think about so many more things at the same time, and you have cinematography and and the storyline is not in a chronological order necessarily, so it's all a bit of it's completely different. It confuses me, if I'm honest, which is kind of why I haven't done it yet. I had many people telling me, why don't you direct a film instead of just doing theater? And it's like, because I'm confused.
Well, I'll bring you my, or if I have the audio. I don't know if I have the audio version of my book, Filmmaking Confidential. But I can figure out a way to get you the MP3 of it somehow, because it really just makes it easy to understand, so that you can really say, "Oh, I could do this," But on this note about both of you, Daniel and Alexander, being from a stage background, I think is the most important thing about this particular movie. My advice would be to both of you is to work with the script as if you were going to go on stage tonight and do it from beginning to end, and really understand, the characters' arcs and movements throughout it, and all your notes, or however you do it when you're working on a script, and maybe you have, colored markers or certain indications to where you are, mentally in this moment. like we did, Daniel, the other day. It's like, we went through from beginning to end as if you were going to go and do this evening, every night for the next week for 2 hours. Because then when we go and do it completely out of order, it's really important to have had that initial idea of where are we today? Where am I, this character at this moment? And a lot of film actors, I think, not all of them, but I have seen in my experience that they'll go into Tuesday and they will look at those scenes and they will learn those scenes and forget all about where those scenes fall in the overall story, and their performance might be accidentally really strong, as far as the character goes. Or sometimes I've seen it where it's not really, it's kind of all over the place. Like it's kind of sometimes clear that they didn't put any thought into their character's arc from beginning, middle, and end. And as I talked to Alexandra a little bit, there is some change, and we'll go through this more on Thursday, but, Marco has some movement where he goes and what he's doing throughout, but he's pretty much the same constant, throughout the thing. And I'm not sure how much he has, like, I think his arc is very, like a very soft arc, whereas Michael's arc is pretty significant, it's from one end to the other. It's blue versus red. I mean, it's like that. And I love that you are wearing the colors of these characters, both of you. And I'm going to explain this to you in a minute. So, though your eyes are green, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to accentuate them by putting you in green sometimes. But what I love about this concept I had, and I think I told you, Jo, if Michael is blue, and I'm thinking of this like paint, like a painting. If he's blue and Marco's red, and it's like there's the warm and the cool, and they're opposites, because Michael is not yet there, in himself. And as you get to know one another, I might even intensify the colors right at that last second, before scene 66, so that on the next day, we see that Michael's color palette changes. And Daniel, if you go through your costumes, you'll see where it's like the next day he's wearing lavender because there's a little bit of red, that's been mixed in him, right? In his being, his spirit. And then by the end of the film, you're wearing pink because you have then become the place where you weren't at the beginning. And that's very subtle and it's very unconscious, but I love doing stuff like that. And I love that you're both wearing those color palettes right now. So I had to bring that up.
The scene is sacred, is what my acting coach used to say. Like, this kind of stuff happens, for a reason.
I love it.
But also, regarding the filming, acting in film doesn't worry me because I've done it a fair bit. In fact, I don't know if you know, Steve, but there's a film that I'm in. So I probably none of you. So I'm going to tell you, it's on streaming right now, so you can watch it if you want. It's called A Dice with Five Sides.
A Dice with Five Sides.
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime, and I think it's on Apple TV. I think it pretty much, US and UK should be, should be still there.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
I watched the trailer.
Sorry, I've had to mute. There's so much noise this end, guys, so I'm hearing you. So you may get the odd thumbs up, but I've had to mute because it's just crazy this end. So I'm just going to keep on popping myself on mute if that's okay, but I can hear everyone perfectly.
Totally. Yeah, you're great. Cool. I am so excited. And I love you guys. I feel so good about this, the energy amongst us that I just can't. There's no words. But we should do this again. And I think that Daniel and Alexander, you guys, feel free to do whatever you do. My only note is when you're talking and getting to know one another, or even if you're doing like a read through, you know, if there's a generalized read through after you and I go through the script on Thursday, Alexander, I maybe should be there, you know, if there's some questions, or you know, pop me in, you know, if you need. But I don't want to over rehearse.
No, that's what I was gonna suggest, Steve. If you guys are okay with it, you and Daniel, I would say that after we had our talk, Steve and I, then we can maybe set up a first session where we all the three of us just read the script, and so we can ask you any questions, and you know, we go through
Yes.
that, and anything that's unclear or anything that, you know, we read it in a way and then you hear it out loud coming from us, and maybe you have a thought, you know, and that kind of stuff. And after that, we can possibly do it again without you. But
yeah,
you know, it's probably important that at the beginning you're there, I think.
I think so too. But I love it because, you know, that's what preparing for a stage play would be like. You would have weeks and weeks of rehearsals. Now, I think that there's something awesome about that, which I rarely do. But I think for this particular case, because there's lots of words, you know, it basically is a stage play. You know, there's a lot of words. And my intention, I think I've told you this, Hanuman, but I'm going to bring it up again. And maybe I've told both of you guys. What I'd like to do, if there's time, is first shoot it as it's written. And then let's say take two is let's shoot it with whatever you think. You know, what are different words? What's a different scenario? You know, how would you do it differently? How would you come at this scene in a different way? And then take three is either let's do the entire scene as it's written, but without using any words whatsoever. And on some of these scenes, that could be really interesting. You know, how to say all of this with just your eyes, or just a movement, or just by your being. You know, I think that might be really interesting. Another way is because sometimes that works really well and it's interesting what comes out, and sometimes it just doesn't work so well. But another way of approaching it might be, let's approach this as improv. You know, like the scene prior, you know, is A, and we know where that ends. And the next scene is C, and we know where that begins. But there are 100 different ways to do B. So let's just play with some, you know, and if there's time, we'll let's do another one, you know, just to see what comes out. And sometimes we did that, you know, with I don't remember to the extent we did that with Alchemy of the Spirit, Hanuman, but when we've done it in the past, sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it's just a fun exercise and you don't end up using any of it. But I think for this, it might be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say yes, absolutely. And also just, you know, while I'm talking, for Alexander and Daniel, I've made a lot of movies. I've made 4 with Steve, and in my circle of crew, you know, Steve is a legend for being the most efficient director that any of us have ever worked with. It's just, it's a miracle. He has the shortest days, the shortest schedules, and the most efficient process of any director I've ever worked with. And it's just, you know, you never know what you're getting into when you go to work for a new director. And so just, if it helps at all to know, like, you're in for a treat. Like, this will be the smoothest, easiest process you've ever had being on camera. And also just a really safe environment for everyone. So yeah, just might as well share that, so you have at least one solid reference to go on.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Hanuman.
of course, man. Thank
It's
you.
really nice
It's
to hear. Thank you, Hanuman.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Steve. Obviously, it's a
Do you know
pleasure.
what? He's just so organized, isn't he? He's just the
Yeah,
most organized person I think I've ever met. It's that master plan blows my mind. It blows my mind.
Absolutely. But you know, I watch some directors who just are greedy, and they do take after take after take, kind of for their own amusement. And Steve doesn't do that. He just gets in, he gets what he needs, and he gets out. And so nothing gets beaten to death, nothing gets you know, run into the ground. You get it and you move on. And it's a real pleasure.
Well, thank you.
It's exciting. It's exciting too. You know, it's quick and fun and seat the pants.
And sometimes it's like when we were doing Bloody Famous, which none of you guys really know about yet, but some of you do, because we haven't told anyone and nobody has seen it, and we're pitching it now. It's completed. It was so quick that so much of the moments when there would be a genius moment with an actor or a really special, beautiful thing, we had to move on so quickly that, like, at the end of the day, we had forgotten, you know, about these beautiful moments because there were so many. And it's somewhat important to stop and say, wow, that was amazing, and just take a minute before moving on. And I need to remember to do that more often. But one of the other things that I want to bring up is that there's no yelling on any of my movie sets. There's no one who raises their voice. There's no anger. There's no, it's often funny and it's very, very light. You know, I know a lot of people have been on movie sets where there's someone yelling at someone, you know, whether it's whatever. And we just don't have any of that, which is helpful.
Very.
Great.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's a lot of fun.
We're excited.
Cool.
Sex, Love, Venice is out now. Experience the film in select theaters and on Prime Video, Fandango at Home, Apple TV, and Google Play. Tune in next time for more Filmmaking Confidential. It is totally free to subscribe, and when you subscribe, you'll get upcoming new episodes automatically, and you'll have free access to all our past shows. The Filmmaking Confidential podcast is a production of Dakanga Audio and produced by myself and Ella Spencer. Our original theme music is composed by Kevin Robles. I'm Steve Balderson. Thanks for listening. Until next time, keep making, keep doing, keep going.